Hello again. The Practical Animal Channel is dedicated to the public understanding of conservation by broadcasting interviews with conservationists from around the globe. These are their stories. Each video showcases what they do and highlights their skill set, our knowledge gaps, and suggests student projects. Today we go to South Africa to join my next guest. Dr. Bool Smuts is founder and general manager of the Landmark Foundation. A leopard expert, Bool lists jobs with these cats, explains how their conservation involves a multidisciplinary approach, and identifies knowledge gaps and leopard conservation projects. To coin the words of eminent conservationist Professor Carl Jones, conservation is not for the squeamish, and neither is this video. Bool, what jobs are there with leopards?
To answer that question succinctly, I'll tell you that it touches from the legal field to the agricultural economics, the wildlife sciences, to the anthropological field. The more important needs lie outside of the biological fields. One of the most key stakeholders we've been dealing with is the legal world in trying to understand what entitlements there are for people and what protections there are for leopards and other species, and how society organizes that. Any youngster or even mature student who might be interested in the field must be prepared for that and not be put off, because I think traditionally our view of ecological sciences is quite limited, and I think the church is widening, if I can put it like that, as far as people that can make a contribution.
Bool, you work with leopards. What does your work involve, please?
Maybe I'll start with a start, because that explains how it evolved. I was involved with a protected area expansion program 20 years ago. And as it turned out, it was in a part of the country that had major state governance problems, as it appears. It's in lots of areas in South Africa. But we stumbled into having to deal with the last remaining top carnivore in the area being leopard. That ended up in conflicts with farmers, and it usually meant traps or hunting parties or snares. And there was grave concern around the species' survival locally. No knowledge of its densities, its resource requirements, even the conflict issues and to what extent it existed, and the mortalities that evolved in the area. Our initial work had been really to try and rescue a few individuals out of traps, which soon dawned upon us the issue was far greater than just a few leopards we got to hear about. Over the years, been able to rescue 72 leopards out of bad situations. So we've got about a 50% success rate even after 20 years. So we still lose a lot of individuals. So over time, the program developed, and it has got essentially 6 core functions. We are a science-driven advocacy organization. So we validate what we do through science, and we publish. So that's important for us, because I think if you don't measure things that you do, you can't really evaluate your effectiveness. And in fact, that's a weakness across the conservation sector. We get involved in each and every leopard that we can rescue. So it's direct action advocacy, and we'll do whatever it takes, confronting killers, treating the animals veterinarily, and then our objective is to release them back into the wild, preferably where they came from. So that's sort of the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we consider the privilege interacting with the individuals, and that leads to a whole field that we can go into perhaps in more detail, but we use that moment to sample data because there's so little known about this nocturnal, solitary, wide-ranging species. We consider that privilege of interacting with it as an obligation to gather data. We probably have the largest leopard research project now currently running in the world, and we've had 52 individuals collared with GPS collars. We've collected genetic data, morphological data, and from that we've done a lot of research. So we've supported 3 PhDs, 4 master's programs, some postdoc students, ongoing research. So we constantly churn our research, and our research is focused on management. So if we're not particularly interested in hairy canaries, there are academics that do that type of thing. We are interested in management sciences or management effectiveness of leopards in the landscape and their interaction with the environment. That is a very big part of what we do. So we investigate problems. We investigate problems with individual leopards. We investigate problems with leopards regionally. We investigate human behavior that leads to problems with leopards. So that's area number 2. Area number 3 is when we interact, it's a golden opportunity to educate for adult education and landowner education. We also work very actively at a younger age, from preschool right through to high school groups, and then we take in volunteers and people that want to get field experience from time to time, provided they can assist us in delivering a sort of a wide-ranging mandate. And then the 4th area is we try and develop wildlife-friendly interactions with landowners that lead to acceptance of the species, coexistence with the species, increasing habitat for them. Then the 5th area is we try and support market mechanisms that lead to changed behavior, knowing that most people react to money. We've developed a value-added ethical brand of meat products. It hasn't had a wide uptake, but certainly we've tested the formula, and we think that is a solution, bringing an incentive in price on the product that comes off wildlife-friendly farms. And through that monetary incentive, drive behavior change. And then an aspect that is vastly growing in our portfolio is our advocacy work, particularly legal advocacy. So we give inputs to legislation changes, administrative issues, and we litigate. We're not scared to take on even the premiers of the provinces and the president if it needs be on issues with environmental legislation, and that is an exploding field across the world in terms of not only environmental rights but human rights that enforce environmental obligations. So that's in a nutshell what we do, those 6 areas of focus.
Bool, what is the natural range of leopards?
The former range, or the historical range, has shrunk, but leopards occur throughout Africa, the Middle East, Southern Asia, even into East Asia. Leopards occur, and in South Africa we have seen a dramatic, certainly in the southern provinces where we operate, a dramatic change in the population over the last 300 years. Interventions like ourselves and other people involved in it have seen a rebound in the populations. But in South Africa, its status is still considered vulnerable on a national basis. But in the southern provinces, where we've had a much longer impact on landscape management, stretching 300 years, we consider the species in the south to be critically endangered, and the genetics illustrate that. It's extirpated from large areas of South Africa, but it is got remnant populations in the coastal belts and heading up the west coast of South Africa into Namibia and Botswana.
Bool, in which parts of their range are they most threatened?
In South Africa, I can speak fairly conclusively about that. It's certainly in the south of the country. So what was traditionally called the Cape Provinces, which is the southern three provinces of the current makeup of South Africa, their numbers are low. We in fact know the exact numbers in the Western Cape Province. We think that there are only 500 individuals left. In the Eastern Cape Province, we think that number is about 400. We don't know the numbers in the Northern Cape Province. Further north in South Africa, the population numbers are stronger in the area around Kruger, which we call the Lowveld. It's the Limpopo and the Mpumalanga provinces, and into the northwest and the Kalahari. Their numbers are better, but in the Cape Provinces, certainly, we're very concerned about what is even reflected in the genetics, where we're seeing bottlenecking taking place.
Bool, do you work with wild leopards or captive leopards or both?
We only work with wild leopards, and there's a good reason for that. Leopards don't do particularly well in captivity. They are a wide-ranging species. They are a solitary species. So we have shied away from the captive industry. As you're probably well aware, the captive industry in South Africa, particularly when it comes to big cats, has not covered itself in glory. And so we made a policy decision that we will not get involved in captive leopard populations. And so our rule of thumb is, if our rescues cannot result in a recovery and release by 21 days, we make a cutoff that animal is very unlikely to have a productive life in the wild, and we do the empathetic act of euthanasia in that instance.
Bool, what can you tell me about the rehabilitation process and this 21-day limit? I presume that comes from a body of research, does it?
We ended up being astonished by the numbers of animals we had to deal with had been trapped and usually were injured. So it was focused around what type of injuries, and that came through the experience, the collective experience of veterinarians. What type of injuries would we likely face in these circumstances? And they were in two categories again. The one category is it is self-evident that the animal is so injured that it wouldn't survive and it would get euthanized really out of the trap. And there have been a few of those kinds of incidents where the leg is or the foot is destroyed to such an extent that it cannot survive. Then there was the category that had minor injuries that could just be treated on site and released immediately, and that's in fact the majority of them that we were able to rescue. Then there's a small category of cases where the clinical outcome was uncertain, and it required further interventions. And those interventions would be either a minor amputation of a toe or a infected lesion that would be need treatment. And the 21 days comes from the clinical experience that if it's that kind of injury, if it's not going to be better by 21 days, it's unlikely to get better thereafter.
Oh, what skills do you need to work with leopards?
It's a tough field. You're dealing often with bad situations and often with your subjects dying on you. I always say to youngsters, don't try and pursue a specific course of work. Figure out a problem that interests you enough to spend the rest of your life trying to solve it. Find what that is, and then consider what you need to qualify to do that. And that often will clarify for you what training you need. So, and if you're not sure, if it's early in your career, go and put yourself in positions, careers that you think might interest you. So if the biological sciences is something that interests you, join an organization like Landmark and go and experience what they do and see whether you can find that problem that you want to solve. So I'm a great fan of experiential education. So to go, if you're certain, particularly, to go and put yourself in those positions, and then you'll understand whether you need to go and train to be a biologist, do a university course through the basic sciences, biology and botany, and do the basics well, because you often need the basics in the field, and then look to specialize beyond that. If you've got through your basic degree, then look to doing genetics, or go and look to doing field biology or ecology or a particular species that we focus on. And then sequentially specialize into that field that you want. But it isn't all about biology. There are lots of kids that come through environmental sciences and don't necessarily have the zoology and botany. There is the legal people coming into our field now. Often they don't have the grounding in the ecological sciences, and it's useful for them to get at least rudimentary understanding of that. So the whole interdisciplinary field is opening up in the sector. So it's biological sciences in the main, management sciences, legal field, even economics play an important. But school yourself in the issues of ecology and the environmental management issues. These fields all overlap, and surely there is some sort of interest in some of those fields that you may end up specializing in. But I think for youngsters, it's invaluable to get field experience just to see what happens, even if it's for a short while, and to recognize it's not all a jeep jockey kind of adventures. It's sometimes very hard grind into the early hours of the morning, and lots of tedious data sifting through and organizing. So it's a long answer to a short question, but that's the scope of it.
What trail cameras, if any, do you use, and why?
Yeah, we extensively use trail cameras, principally because it's a species that's difficult to study. It gives us the coat pattern, which is like a fingerprint. We want to get still image that is clear during the day and at nighttime, a video clip of 5 to 10 seconds. The camera we happen to stumbled upon and ended up using extensively is the Cudderback range, which gave us that functionality. It's sort of a mid-range camera. It's not the cheapest. It's certainly not the most expensive. We were able to adapt battery input to such an extent that we could get a very long functionality, up to 4 months in the field, which then cuts down on the serviceability of those cameras. For many years now, we've got up to 200, sometimes 250 cameras in the field, depending on where we survey. They're incredibly valuable to buy collaboration in from landowners. It is absolutely amazing how little people know about the wildlife that share their landscape with them. Our work is mainly focused on production landscapes. So there are lots of organizations that do work on protected areas. Our work is almost principally on production landscape. And I say to my staff, if we're not in the conflict zone, we're not at work, because that's what we try and address.
Bool, how would you describe leopard conservation today?
We commoditize species here. So we've got a government and a wildlife farming sector which have equated these animals with money, and only if they provide financial returns, or they grace the opportunity to coexistence. In the current scenario, we are just flooded with new legislation that is just going to make it worse for leopards. So I actually consider it in a very precarious and messy situation at the present. In our research, the stopping of the vermin hunt clubs and the bounty system, leopard rebounded in certain areas. So I'm actually deeply worried, on top of the fact that the past practices have resulted in genetic bottlenecking and land transformation that's ongoing. We lose habitat, and a leopard won't step into an area that's been plowed up. So every time we lose a bit of that, and it's death by 1,000 plows, we lose habitat.
Bool, how would you describe leopard conservation for the 21st century?
We've handed out those common assets to private gain or private interest. So I believe the future lies in addressing that. How does private individuals gain the rights to public assets and can do with that as they wish? As far as the science is concerned, my sense is that genetics and the interrogation of population genetics is the new frontier in measuring how effective we are in conserving species. So I think those are the two big fields I see opening up into the future. And never mind our practical day-to-day, learning to speak to a farmer, learning to intervene in a conflict situation, finding resolution to clinical issues, to ecological issues, rewilding issues. Those will be ongoing, and I think we'll just get more and more intense as we fight over smaller crumbs.
What advice can you offer someone who wants to work with leopards?
Read. Get as much information about people that have worked for the species, and if you can cope with the scientific literature, have a look at it, at least look at the abstracts. It gives you a sense of where the understanding of the species is. And then I would strongly suggest, if you're coming from an area where you haven't had experience or exposure to either the environments in which these cats live or the cats themselves, then I would strongly recommend that you try and hook up with conservation organizations that focus on that particular species, if that's what your interest is. And there are people working throughout South Africa on it. Hook up with one of the NGOs that usually take these people in, or a researcher, if you happen to know one, and go and spend 2 weeks to 2 months with them in the field and really see what it is, what the day-to-day involvement is. And it's very varied. It's often sleeping out. It's often rough. Try and find that problem that you're prepared to work at solving for the rest of your life, and then only consider what training you need for it. That is the way to build a career. And it's not going to happen overnight, so be prepared to put in the time.
Where do the gaps in our knowledge lie with leopards? What would make a good research?
Yeah, let's go and identify the population density in an area. Well, what are the resources they need? Why do people kill them? That's environmental and agricultural economics that you're entering into. We do need to do a full genome analysis. What are the resources leopards need to occupy a landscape? And we analyze that. We're currently writing a paper on rewilding and what were the determinants that one area got rewilded and another one not. Conflict hotspots. So it really depends on where you are. There's a lot of work on protected areas that has been done over the years. And, it's kind of the lazy research that's available, and, they accommodate. The tough work is on the production landscapes. And I would, I think that's where the huge gap is.
Bool, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think it's a wonderful career. We need good minds on it. Ecology is a young science. It has to mature in many respects. But the thing about science is it's about proving ourselves wrong, isn't it? Actually, we make advances when we prove ourselves wrong and we refine our hypotheses. We need brave scientists. We need clever, young, energetic minds that come at this problem from all angles. So it's got a bright future. It certainly is extremely meaningful work. If that's your vocation, please come to this profession. It's needed.
Bool, you are the founder and general manager of the NGO, the Landmark Foundation. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal Channel, Dr. Bool Smuts.
Thank you, John. It's been an honor to chat to you.